false solutions. Climate false solutions such as nuclear power, hydropower, biofuel, fracking, enhanced oil recovery, carbon offsets, bioenergy and carbon capture and storage, biodiversity offsets, zero net emissions, and nature-based solutions. All these false solutions are being sold by corporations, intergovernmental organizations, and NGOs alike as ways to combat climate change that also so-called boost the green economy. Quote-unquote solutions rooted in growth and profit will not solve the climate crisis and will continue to enact violence on the natural world and on the frontline communities across the globe. Our panel focuses on voices and organizations that contribute to movements for systemic change and climate justice led by frontline communities and nurtured through processes of resistance, resurgence, and decolonization. As we face up to COP26 in Glasgow, starting this coming week, it's important that we underline the struggles against false solutions that are being centered in this process. We feature Indigenous organizations leading frontline struggles against false solutions that are impacting them, from Mapuche communities in Chile to Diné communities in the southwest of Turtle Island, Anishinaabe resistance to hydropower, and international Indigenous Minga mobilization for Mother Earth against climate false solutions. Speakers will share stories from the front lines about their efforts to stop the ongoing impacts of false climate solutions, such as nuclear power, toxic waste dumping, megadams for hydropower, all of which cause displacement and biodiversity loss, land, water, and ocean grabs for industrial agriculture, biofuel plantation, continued extractivism, the petrochemical and fossil fuel industry, as well as other projects that contribute to displace Indigenous peoples while failing to address climate change at its root causes. The panel builds on the momentum created by the report Hoodwinked in the Hothouse, 3rd edition, Resisting False Solutions to Climate Change, co-created through the contributions of the coalition of organizations that make up the collective known as climatefalsesolutions.org. It follows upon a panel, part 1, titled Hoodwinked in the Hothouse, Examining False Corporate Schemes Advanced through the Paris Agreement. I'll open it up to my co-moderator, Shela Arif, who will be introducing the panelists at this point. Thank you, Shela.
Thank you, Leo. Welcome, everyone. I am Shela Arif, one of the co-authors of the Hoodwinked. I'm also a faculty of mechanical engineering. And before I start introducing the panelists, I just wanted to make 2 very quick points. One, all of our panelists are have been involved for a very long time in amazing struggles against false solutions to climate change. There's no way I'm going to be able to capture all of that. So just want to apologize for very, very brief introductions here. And the second point is that all of our panelists are actually what the struggles they've been involved in correspond directly to various chapters in the Hoodwinked. So just to give you some context, the stories they bring forward add a new dimension to the report that we produced. So with that, Candy White of Indigenous Environmental Network, she will be speaking on the effects of hydraulic fracturing, and her involvement has been locally into the tribal colleges in terms of community-based environmental programs and issues of socio-ecologic injustice, introducing young people to that, as well as international advocacy work, including United Nations forums and a testimony before the US Congress. The second speaker today is Leona Morgan, who is the co-founder of Nuclear Issues Study Group, and has addressed, in collaboration with several other groups, the entire nuclear fuel chain in the US, with the focus on how nuclear energy is a global climate issue. Ruben Sanchez Corientro is from Chile, and he has participated in diverse research projects in socio-demographics and territorial areas. And there's a lot that I can talk about him, but I think I would rather leave time for speakers to talk about their struggles themselves. Mindahi Bastida holds a doctorate in rural development, and he has written on the relationship between the state and indigenous peoples, intercultural education, collective intellectual property rights, and associated traditional knowledge. He also provided us the spiritual grounding today. Lucien Wabanonik from Anishinaabe Nation is the spokesperson for a coalition of 3 nations and 5 communities fighting Hydro-Quebec and the Quebec government. Lucien is an elected member of the Anishinaabe Nation Council of Lac-Simon. Finally, I'm just going to quickly introduce Gopal, who is also co-moderating with us. Has been involved in long-time struggles, co-founder of Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project. And I'm going to now hand it over to Gopal to provide us a very brief context for the Hoodwinked and the conversation that's going to follow, given our wonderful panelists. Over to Gopal.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Gopal, and I'm with Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project, and I also teach at San Francisco State University and at Antioch University. And I was asked to share just a little bit of context of the relationship between false solutions and the Conference of Parties process of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the first thing that popped into my mind was, well, the Conference of Parties is a festival of false solutions. This most recent Conference of Parties that's about to begin in Glasgow next week is particularly a false solution for even advancing false solutions, because it should not be happening at all in the context of the pandemic, in which inequitable access to participation for civil society, indigenous peoples, and global South nations is on full display. The Conference of Parties from the beginning, since the Kyoto Protocol, has been this festival of false solutions, as I said, from the clean development mechanism to the push for geoengineering, which is coming forward full force in COP26, which begins next week. While at this time every year, the mainstream media and in fact, the mainstream of the climate movement turns its attention to whether governments will take action to address the climate crisis, or in the case of the mainstream climate movement, demanding that governments take action to address the climate crisis. The climate justice movement gears up not with the false hope that something good will come out of these negotiations, but to stop the worst of what is being put forward, from REDs to geoengineering to carbon markets to offsets, and to hold governments accountable to the best language in the Framework Convention itself, the notion of common but differentiated responsibility, that the rich countries are the ones responsible and the rich countries must make the changes necessary. Indigenous peoples, small island nations, some global South states, and many social movements, from La Via Campesina, the global movement of peasants for food sovereignty, to grassroots frontline communities across Turtle Island and the world, have led the interventions against these false solutions and have demonstrated the real solutions. Do not think of the COPs as a way of negotiating climate solution. Think of COPs as primarily a vehicle for co-optation. They take important principles such as the protection of biodiverse, intact forests by indigenous peoples and turn them into cash crops through REDs. They take negative emissions that we know we can get to by restoring indigenous sovereignty, food sovereignty and agroecology, energy democracy, and the decommodification of land, and turn it into a justification for extreme disturbance of planetary life support systems through false and unproven technologies. So and we cannot let them sell the lie that we can sell out the rivers with dams or fell the forests or burn trash or other extreme energies simply as a workaround to addressing the fundamental failures of a system that is eating the planet alive. I want to just close by saying what an honor it is to be in space with so many amazing indigenous leaders who have led the way and who are the front lines of the resistance to false solutions, and who, through the struggle for sovereignty and for free, prior, and informed consent, have managed to stop geoengineering experiments in the Americas and in Sweden, and continue to be the best hope for the restoration of land, labor, and livelihoods. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gopal. All right, so with this, we're going to begin the first round of questions. So I'm going to pose a question for all of the panelists today. Briefly introduce the work of your community, nation, movement, organization, and bring the audience up to speed about your struggles versus false solutions. Kindly unpack for the audience, why are the issues you're facing false solutions to climate change, especially from an Indigenous perspective? So we'll begin with Candy, and then Leona, Lucien, Ruben, Mindahi. Candy, over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce myself in my language. So So in my Heradza language, I said, hello relatives, my name is Eagle Woman. I am Mandan Heradza Arekra from so-called North Dakota in the so-called United States of America, also known as Turtle Island. I am calling in today from what some people call Crow Country in the state of Montana, also known as Absolute Gut Territory. And I'm very honored to be here today representing myself and also the work I do with the Indigenous Environmental Network. It's very difficult to answer this question in such a short time frame, but I will do so showing pictures of my lived experience as a Mandan Heradza Rikara woman who grew up on a reservation in North Dakota that has had to deal with a lot. And this is a story that encompasses a lot of our Indigenous populations in the United States and Canada, and why we find ourselves in the situations that we find ourselves in now when it comes to the climate crisis and when it comes to fossil fuel development. So I'm hoping to give an understanding of a bigger picture of our experiences as people who long time ago lived on the land, we relied on the land. We lived in earth lodge villages along the waters because we were farmers. We grew corn, we grew squash, we grew beans, and our men even tended their own tobacco. We had a lifestyle in which our villages were connected and took care of each other as peoples together in a whole family, a whole village of a community. And what happened was smallpox came and colonization began happening. And we started seeing all of these things where other tribes were being pushed from the East Coast to the Midwest and onward as colonization came to the now so-called United States. And that's when we started getting put into reservations. Ours was the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851. The Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara nations, 3 separate nations, were put together on one reservations because our numbers had been so decimated by smallpox. And we were so similar that we were now known as the 3 affiliated tribes by the federal government. Instead of earth lodges, we then began living in structures that were built for us by white men. That's a picture of this taking place. The year was 1860. There's a reason why our reservations start with the name Fort. My reservation is called Fort Berthold. That's because it was actually a fort that we weren't allowed to leave. We were placed on this land, and at that time it was 12 million acres. It has over the years been seceded by presidential and executive orders to just under 1 million acres where it is today. They put us here because they figured there wasn't anything here. There was no resources, it wasn't valuable land, and they could just kind of do away with us by putting us here. Well, as it turned out, the very first thing that happened to my people is that we were flooded out of our lands. Flooding in St. Louis and Missouri that was happening because they were mismanaging their waterways started happening. So a series of dams was built. Every single dam was built below a reservation. Mine, Fort Berthold, was flooded by the Garrison Dam. It was the largest earthen construction at the time, the largest earthen construction project. And by the time our tribal chairman signed on to this project, he's there crying in this picture. Our chairman, George Gillette, they were already $60 million into the construction by the time we agreed to it. So that was the first thing that happened. First, it was the reservation, and then we were forced off of our bottomlands, which was where all of our class 1 and class 2 agricultural lands were flooded. We were forced onto the high ground. That's when we became farmers, our ranchers. You know, they told us you have to have cattle. You have to be living this way now. Your agricultural lands are flooded and you're going to go live on the high ground. So the second assault after the reservation. And then another assault came in the form of the fossil fuel industry. North Dakota is one of the highest, largest lignite coal states in the country. And so as a child, I had heard from my grandparents how we had been displaced. And then I started to get taught in school how it was so important for me to go into the fossil fuel industry. So here I am as a 7th grader, standing in a dump of one of these large industry places, being told this is my future. And then after that, we've seen contamination of mercury in all of our waterways. Every single bit of our over 11,000 miles of rivers, lakes, and streams in North Dakota is contaminated by mercury. And now we have the oil development for fracking. Fracking only began in 2005 when the Energy Policy Act was changed. It was the Halliburton loophole, called that because the former CEO of the company, Halliburton, was able to put a loophole in to say that we didn't have to tell what the chemicals were that we were using as a company. Well, I shouldn't say we, they, as oil companies, didn't have to tell the chemicals that were being used. That's why fracking is allowed to continue, because of this Halliburton loophole that changed in the 2005 Energy Policy Act. It's also why it's so devastating to our people. Here we are on a reservation where they put us thinking there was nothing there, but then it turned out we had coal. It turned out we had oil. And in North Dakota, they're fracking for the oil, not the natural gas. The natural gas is actually a byproduct. And so we started seeing all of these rigs popping up all over. Places where my grandma used to fast, like this place, were no longer available to us. We were seeing these in our wheat fields, these signs that said industrial zoned. No longer were we the breadbasket of the country to feed the rest of the country. We're now a site where trucks infiltrate our roads, where they take over our cisterns and our waterways, where they kill people and have killed people in accidents, running on the roads, running people over, and have dumped their frack water right onto the highways. And they have done this all unjustly and as a result of a system of the way our reservation was set up, and the jurisdiction laws between Native people and non-Native people were set up. So there's a history here of this setting up of Indigenous peoples, so that when accidents occur, like this spill, nothing is done. The spill in 2014 has contaminated our land. It's still contaminated. We had to do our own studies to find out that this earth is still radioactive. They put little sandbags out when we have spills and say this is going to protect our waterways. Yeah, our water has blue-green algae blooms, killing our fish, and this is what our people drink. This is actual water taken out 1 mile from our water intake plant. No doctoring, this was blue. And they told us it's fine. Little did we know that they're toxic, blue-green algae blooms. You shouldn't drink the water, you shouldn't swim in the water, which we were. And then we started having fish kills. Now, North Dakota is in the central part, Midwest, right in the middle of Turtle Island. It's the geographic center of North America. We're very rural. So these lights here, those aren't lights. No, they're flares. They're flaring the natural gas because it wasn't economically viable for them to capture the natural gas. So when they talk about natural gas as a bridge fuel, and you see issues like in Texas, when water is being shut down, power is being shut down, they're saying, oh, what are we going to do? We have no energy. They're just flaring all this natural gas, even not even capturing it because it's not economically viable to them. So we're breathing this in. Our children are having asthmas, cancers. All of our people are sick. Why? Because the carcinogens, which are cancer causing, and these are just a few that come along with fracking. These things that we breathe every day, that go into our water, that go into our soil, which we grow our food in every single day, happening to our communities. But yet there's a social aspect of the man camps that came, and they just started to destroy our communities. People from around the world looking for jobs in the industry. It's all about jobs, they say. We started seeing violence against our women, rape. We started seeing missing and murdered Indigenous women increasing, violence on the rise. We started seeing drugs. So when people like Ashley here got caught up in heroin that came when the industry came, and when she died, people said, well, she was one of those druggies. She didn't get the help that she needed as a result of an industry that brought this violence to us. When Lisa died from her addiction to heroin, she left behind 5 children. Both of them had their hands and feet turn black as their bodies shut down. And they were told, well, it was just because they were the problem. My cousin Daniel went missing in 2013, and we found him. We were able to recover him. He was last seen with people who were known to be drug criminals, part of a very large and dangerous organization, MS-13. But he was blamed for his own death. There was never any justice as to why he died and why his body was found floating in the water the following spring. And what are we left with? Racism. We are left with this increased violence in our communities as a result of this, in this colonized world, that capitalism that brought us to this point, to where our own leaders say, we fought against the reservation and we lost. We fought against our lands being flooded and we lost. We fought against the coal and we lost. And so why not? If you can't beat them, join them. And so a lot of our leaders in Indian country today are in this struggle of having to depend on either becoming economically dependent on our own cultural destruction. I'll check there. Thank you.
Thank you, Candy. Leona?
Hi, thank you so much, Candy, for sharing your story. I've actually never heard all of that from you, and so I'm just going to do the same and introduce myself and share a little bit of my story, and then hopefully get through some. I have some slides to share just to illustrate some of the things I'm going to talk about. Really quickly, is my volume okay? Cool. So hello everyone. I am Diné, and my people are from as it says, the Southwest Turtle Island. So specifically what we called today, so-called New Mexico. My family's from Northwestern New Mexico, and our people, especially in the what's called the Grants Mineral District or the Grants Mineral Belt, have been severely impacted by uranium mining, which a lot of people know about. So I'm going to just show some slides that are hopefully will explain very clearly for everybody, so you can all explain to your networks what I'm going to share about why nuclear is a false solution. So first of all, I'll just start by going through a definition of nuclear colonialism, and then kind of get into some of the current issues today. There's a lot of things people can do right now, things in Congress, just stuff that you all can do in your everyday lives to help us build resistance against what one of my organizations calls the nuclear beast. So this is a definition that we put together from several different sources, and ultimately we're just explaining how nuclear colonialism is a continuation of the systematic and systemic dispossession of indigenous lands, so exploitation of resources, in this sense, minerals and uranium, and then of course the continued oppression of indigenous peoples worldwide. So I don't know how many of you know, but uranium mining affects indigenous people mostly. I think we estimate about 70% of the time it's impacting indigenous peoples. And then that's not even to mention the processing and the fuel fabrication, and then the weapons testing, which there was a lot of in the United States. I don't think folks know there's been over 1,000 tests on Western Shoshone lands in Nevada. So essentially, if you look at it that way, we are all downwinders. We are all impacted by nuclear colonialism. And I do have another presentation where I go through the policies. I'm not going to do that today, but let me just take a step back and I'll just quickly run through a couple of the important things that happened. The Doctrine of Discovery, 1493. So this is kind of like where I think it really started. And then fast forwarding, of course, there's colonization, the United States. But one of the big things that happened was this thing called, well, two big things, the Dawes Act. So the allotment, the division of lands, divide and conquer stuff, that's still impacting us today in uranium country, mostly in checkerboard areas. And it's having really intense implications in communities where there's allotments and there's fracking. And then so that was the Dawes Act in the 1860s, and then 1872 mining law was basically what allowed all of the gold mining, silver, copper, lead, molybdenum, uranium. So this was a law that basically allowed like a free for all for, encouraging white settler colonialism, a way to take ownership of land, stealing land, legalizing the theft of land through mineral resource extraction. So then moving forward, we have the Atomic Energy Commission of the Manhattan Project, all of that happened from World War II. And that's really what prompted a lot of the development of uranium as a weapon. And then later we have uranium being used as, for nuclear energy. So today, that's really what we're talking about. But the bottom line is nuclear energy and nuclear weapons both come from uranium. And we need to stop taking uranium out of the ground. And I just want to challenge everyone, whenever we talk about fossil fuels and all of these things, extraction, leave it in the ground, please, I ask everyone to also include uranium and nuclear. Just because uranium's not a fossil fuel, we kind of get left out, but we really need your support out there to remember no fossil fuels, keep it in the ground, as well as uranium, and no nuclear. And this is why. So just to give you some background where I'm coming from, southwestern part of the United States, we call this the Four Corners area. My people are from about here. Right now, I'm in what's called so-called Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm just going to mute my notifications. Actually, I can't do that right now, but okay. So this is another map of my communities at home, and just to be very frank, I am not a frontline community. I never claimed to be a frontline community, but I am an Indigenous activist whose family has been hurt by uranium. So lots of cancers, lots of problems that, you know, people, deaths and things like that in my family, as well as in the community today ongoing, which is why we need to pass RICA amendments. So I think someone is going to help me post in the chat information about that. So methane spot. Okay, resource colonialism. On Navajo, we had a lot of coal mining. That's beginning to shut down, but we have a lot of issues with that. And I just want to bring up this map because in all these places where coal was mined and where the fracking is going on, fracking is mostly in the northwestern New Mexico again. These are places where uranium is in the ground. Oh, and there was a big, huge fire in 2016 people don't know about. So lots of issues with the fracking. But my focus today is uranium. So keeping in mind where all this extraction is happening, like especially in South Dakota and other places where uranium is also present, we're having the mixture of both, you know, extracting coal and radioactive elements, which is not good. Breathing in radon gas and all the health effects are really important for folks to know about, but I'm not going to touch on that today. My focus is really to explain why nuclear is a false solution. And this infographic shows kind of a little, it doesn't have everything. Weapons is missing, but it kind of shows from cradle to grave, from uranium to the power plant. So we have all these different steps. Several of them are in New Mexico. And the big thing is right here at the power plant, this is where they measure the carbon footprint of nuclear, only here. So this is mostly steam and radiation and heat. So temperature, heat, radiation heat and hot temperature heat, which contributes to global warming. But anyways, all of this beginning, what we call the front end, none of that is counted in the carbon footprint of nuclear. And most importantly, the waste is also not counted, which will be radioactive for essentially millions of years. And we have to safeguard it, we have to watch it, and all of that, the transportation, everything, that is not counted in the carbon footprint because it's just convenient for them not to count the carbon footprint of forever. So this is the most toxic radioactive stuff on the planet. It comes from uranium. These are some slides I don't have time to go through, but there's a lot of abandoned mines in the country, 15,000 that need to be cleaned up. One area is Church Rock, New Mexico. I really want to talk more about this if I have time later, because there's an open comment period right now. But the background of uranium and the processing and all the leftover contamination that we have to deal with has not been dealt with. The United States left 15,000 abandoned mines across the country. There's no law to clean them up. And right here, you can see most of that uranium came out of the West. And then some in Texas, a little bit in the East Coast, not really much. But if you look at this map that shows all of the nuclear power plants, this is where they use the uranium to make electricity. And as you can see, there's not a lot in the West. However, now they want to get rid of the waste because it's really dangerous and it's like the most toxic stuff on the planet. So all these communities where there's a high population, mostly white communities in the East Coast, they want to get rid of this stuff. So they're trying to, you know, bring it back to the West, specifically Southeast New Mexico and Texas. So we're fighting this. The Texas site just got licensed last month. The New Mexico site will probably be licensed in January. So we're fighting this. The state is fighting this. But yeah, we really need people's help. And again, if you look at this map, all those little white lines, this is all fracking country. This is called the Permian Basin. We already got one waste dump here called WIP. WIP is a weapons waste dump. What I'm talking about is waste from nuclear energy. So this is the proposal for one site, which is the largest in the world. And this is the other one in Texas. So these are the two sites, 40 miles apart, just north of an already existing site that also wants to expand. But it's all within, lots of unstable areas. And these are all the reasons why we say no. It's technically illegal under federal law, lots of opposition. But yeah, this is why nuclear is a false solution. There's absolutely no place to put the waste. And there's really no work toward just equitable and that kind of process towards finding a solution. So a friend of mine, we're working together to build resistance against this. And we're gonna put some links in the chat and in the email. And we'd love to have Indigenous people representing their communities fighting any parts of the nuclear fuel chain. We'd love for you to join us to build our resistance against nuclear colonialism. So thank you very much. I'm sorry, I know a little bit over time, but I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Leona. Lucienne? Okay, so if Lucienne is not on the call, maybe we can move on to Ruben. And in the meanwhile, perhaps Laura, can you check if Lucienne is here? So Ruben.
Hola, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias, la verdad, muchas gracias por la invitación y mi reconocimiento también a quienes están organizando este evento porque es una mirada es una mirada distinta respecto de lo que tradicionalmente lo que se está haciendo, lo que están haciendo todos. O sea, plantearse el tema de las falsas soluciones como preocupación de lo que está ocurriendo es precisamente, si no bien ser parte, pero por lo menos considerar las otras partes respecto y particularmente de los pueblos indígenas, lo que queremos decir. Mi nombre es Rubén Sánchez, soy de Chile, soy mapuche de Chile, hijo de lonco, de un jefe de comunidad, lonco de comunidad se dice en mapuche, de un territorio mapuche, y soy también parte del Observatorio Ciudadano, digamos, soy parte del directorio, actualmente el directorio del Observatorio Ciudadano. Voy a tratar de, tal como estaba definido inicialmente, voy a tratar de organizarme como en 3 momentos, digamos, de lo que quiero compartir con ustedes. Así que, bueno, el tema que voy a compartir un poco es básicamente lo que tiene que ver con los procesos, digamos, de ocupación en el último tiempo, o sea, más bien de la industria forestal y de las centrales hidroeléctricas, en este caso, para la producción de energía. Decirle que actualmente, hoy ya más de 15 días, y ayer se renovó un estado de excepción acá en Chile, lo que significa estado de excepción constitucional, lo que significa es un proceso de militarización de la zona, digamos, o más bien la militarización del territorio ancestral mapuche, del cual MAP. Esto está ocurriendo en las regiones del Biobío y la Araucanía, fundamentalmente, y nadie se explica, cuando digo nadie, más bien me refiero al gobierno, no se explica y no entiende por qué ocurre. ¿Por qué ocurre tanta violencia acá, digamos, y no saben ni tampoco cómo detenerla, ¿no? Entonces, y como decían en un momento también, antes del 18 de octubre acá en Chile, nadie lo veía venir. O sea, es curioso, pero la verdad es que nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, los mapuches en particular, hace mucho tiempo que le estamos avisando y ya hace rato que lo veíamos venir. Y es muy sencillo, digamos, es muy simple. Quiero compartir un poco con las cifras. Actualmente, los mapuches, posterior a 1884, cuando se hace después de la ocupación, en 1884, se hace de parte del Estado la asignación de propiedad, digamos. Lo que antes era el territorio, ya posterior a la ocupación, lo que hace el Estado chileno es otorgamiento de la propiedad, o sea, pasamos de territorio a la propiedad, que son muy distintos en la tierra-territorio. Entonces, esta propietarización significó el otorgamiento del Estado, o sea, curioso, lo que era nuestro lo otorga el Estado, ¿no es cierto?, de 510.386 hectáreas. Eso es lo que otorgó el Estado, lo que finalmente termina reconociendo y está para efectos de establecimiento de propiedad, ¿ya? Y actualmente, hoy día, en este mismo espacio ancestral o territorial, en este mismo territorio histórico, las empresas forestales tienen control sobre 1.389.000 hectáreas aproximadamente. O sea, si yo coloco estas dos cifras sobre la mesa, sobre la reflexión, se imaginarán ustedes cuál es el origen del problema y por qué la situación, digamos, lo que está ocurriendo hoy día. Entonces, dicho eso, digamos, partiendo, entonces, lo que ocurre hoy es eso, o sea, hoy día tenemos una serie de formas nuevas de ocupación. Quiero retomar un poco lo que decía el primer expositor, no me recuerdo su nombre ahora, pero esto, digamos, como de las falsas soluciones o de las soluciones, digamos, que permanentemente colocan desde la estructura del Estado, desde los gobiernos, digamos. ¿Se me está escuchando, sí? Bien. Entonces, hoy día, solo, o sea, la propiedad forestal constituye, como le decía, un control de la propiedad de 1.300.000, o sea, más del doble de lo que tiene la propiedad. Ahora, de ese total de propiedad, el 70% de ese total es controlado por dos familias. O sea, dos familias tienen casi el doble del total de propiedad que tiene la población, digamos, en este caso, hoy día, que actualmente radica en el territorio ancestral del Mapuche, que es la región del Biobío y la región de la Araucanía. Dada esta situación, o dado estos datos, un poco se podría explicar o se explica la situación de entre comillas, conflicto que se genera o que hay y que hoy día tiene de nuevamente al gobierno de Chile con militarización en este asunto. Antes de terminar, para dejar solamente planteado el tema, entonces, ¿cómo se las arreglan o cómo hacen finalmente? ¿O cómo es lo que esto ocurre? Esto ocurre fundamentalmente con la complicidad y con el amparo del Estado. O sea, las políticas de gobierno y los gobiernos frente a distintas instancias en las que participan permanentemente están generando herramientas que permitan la apropiación, la expropiación y el control de los poco y nada de territorio que actualmente nosotros vivimos. Yendo al tema, digamos, de las falsas soluciones o la neutralidad o el efecto de cambio climático y todo ese asunto, hoy día no hay una consideración respecto de los conocimientos tradicionales ni tampoco del respeto a los territorios para el efecto de contener el cambio climático. Lo que sí hay son la creación de instancias, digamos, y mecanismos que lo dejan fundamentalmente, la solución y la proposición queda en manos del mercado. Y lo que hacen las empresas, en este caso, o los ocupadores, hacen crear mecanismos que le permitan blanquear o que le permitan limpiar su acción. Hoy día, por eso quise relevar la cifra inicialmente, hoy día sale en las propagandas de la radio acá en Chile y de la televisión, Arauco carbono neutral. O sea, Empresas Arauco tiene carbono neutral. ¿Qué significa eso? Carbono, o sea, emisión cero, eso significa. O sea, una empresa que tiene ocupación del territorio, ¿no es cierto?, que tiene plantaciones forestales como el del pino y eucalipto, que son contaminantes, se muestra al mundo, digamos, y a los distintos espacios, y probablemente a esta conferencia de las partes, como una empresa con carbono neutral. Entonces, eso es lo que está ocurriendo un poco acá, y en el ámbito energético es lo mismo. Hoy día se habla de energías renovables no convencionales, ¿no es cierto?, en la producción de energías limpias, y las centrales hidroeléctricas o las centrales de pasada, y particularmente, digamos, en una central de pasada, que en el caso de Yancalil, en la que nosotros, digamos, nuestro territorio le ha tocado hacer defensa y a defender el territorio, el argumento para efecto de la construcción de la central era exactamente lo mismo, es producción de energía limpia, energía verde, pero lo que ocurre es otra forma y otro mecanismo de ocupación de los territorios, digamos, en este caso, de territorio mapuche. Dejo hasta ahí en esta parte para después continuar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ruben. Let's see if Lucian is on the call. Let's try Lucian again. Lucian, can you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
All right. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah. Again, my name is Lucian Wabanonik. I'm an Anishinaabe person, so my nation is Anishinaabe also. It's kind of difficult because I don't have no presentation to make, so I'll try to be really precise in the way I say things. We're fighting this Hydro-Quebec organization. That's a state-owned organization, Quebec-owned organization within Canada. And we've been fighting this for many years now in our different communities. I represent the Anishinaabe people for this presentation today, simply because you mentioned in the beginning that I was representing 3 nations, but at this time, some of those nations and communities have signed an agreement with the Quebec government or Hydro-Quebec state-owned organization. So now we have only Anishinaabe communities that are fighting those dams, large dams, small dams, different size of dams that creates a lot of dead zones, I would call, simply because those dams create the water levels are sometimes really low, and that creates a negative impact on the environment, on the waters, on the fish, on the wildlife, and that's those few elements that are just saying, simply because it's very hard for people to still use traditional food coming from those waters and lands. And, it's the gas methane that, when the waters are low, it creates gas methane. So this is a contribution, a direct contribution on the climate change, we believe. If you look at on the states, you have the Hoover Dam. That could give you an example how large can those dams be. Within Quebec, in Canada, we have probably at least 12 of those small or big dams that are within our unceded territories. I say unceded simply because we've never signed any agreement or treaties with any governments since first contact. So for us, it's still Anishinaabe sovereignty. It's still unceded territory. We have rights in those territories, and they are supposed to be protected by the Canadian Constitution. Article 35 is an article coming from that Constitution, and it says that people who have rights should be protected. I don't have all the article, but I can tell you that this is something that's written in this Constitution that is used in Canada. So, the dams that we're trying, the land and the water that we're trying to protect for the next generation is something that needs to be, we need to protect those lands and waters, because it's going to be for the next generations to use them. The waters that we drink probably are contaminated. I'll give you an example. we have this small community that's called Kitsakik, and they live beside one of those dams. Not a big one, but it has a lot of impact on their communities and peoples. They don't have running water. They don't have electricity. And here we are in 2021. And governments, doesn't matter the color or the, where they come from, they came and they went to see the community. Everyone said, it's so sad, it's so sad. But nothing is done for the people over there that live beside those dams. And, the Quebec government and this Hydro-Quebec organization, or the state-owned organization, is always using the same strategy. Divide and conquer strategy is still working nowadays. Doesn't matter where you stay. It's still the same old way of doing things. The colonizers is always right. The colonizers is always, doing the good thing for them poor little Indians. That's how they think. That's how they see it. That's how they work with most of our peoples. And this needs to change. It doesn't matter where you stay. It's in the States or here in Canada or in Quebec, whatever the place. We need to have a better understanding of what's happening all over the place. I've heard, the speakers, heartfelt messages of their stories. And the Anishinaabe people, where I'm from, that's my nation's name. And we still have to fight for our rights to be respected. This is wrong. This is ongoing, and we need to make changes. And we need you people, to make those changes, to pave the way and see what alternative we can have and use. For example, we on our side, we're planting trees. We're having this solar panels, that we're trying to get for the community. Solar turbines, water turbines for with the sea. We can use the sea as a free energy. We can use those and create safe energy with that. And there's a lot of things, that contributes to this kind of way of doing things. We have also on our side responsibilities, the way we use those energy, the way we live every day. We need to see how we do it, impact on the biodiversity. There's a lot of things that we could do on ourselves, but we need partners also in some of those projects, because we need help coming from other expertise, for example, and there's a lot of I think synergy that we could create amongst the peoples and nations, but also different organizations coming from different areas. We need to have the same language regarding the planet Earth, Mother Earth. Like one of those presentations just mentioned, Mother Earth is sick. Mother Earth is in need of a cure, but we can do only so much with one community, one organization. We need to have a larger audience or people that will be involved in some ways, in their own ways, because not everyone can, we can only do so much for ourselves. But, if we start looking at each other and see what we can do, sharing the information, educating people, educating the language, for example, strategies that within communication. We need to also talk to younger generation to educate them, because they're the ones who's going to have probably more impacts than us today. They'll be the ones who'll be living with the long-term effects in their lives. And, earth and water can endure only so much. So life is water. Life is water. We only can say that so many times, but we need to say it again and again. If we don't have clean water, safe water to drink, no one will survive. Doesn't matter where we live. If we don't have water, it's going to be very, very hard for every living thing. So for me, it's not just about hydro dams, it's about water also. Simply because if we don't have, those, elements, air, water, earth, they're all bound together. This is a sacred relation that we as First Nation have with Mother Earth and water in all living things. So for us as First Nation peoples, Canada or US, I think that we have some of those solutions that we can bring up and share, but we only can do so much on our side. We need your voices. We need your help. Mother Earth needs your help. So
Yeah.
I'll stop at this time just to let you know where I'm from. My community's name is Laxino. It's a French name, but in my language it's called Shiship Sagigan, meaning duck lake in English, I'd say. And I'm one of 11 communities of Anishinaabe communities, and I'm from the northeast of Canada in Quebec, the Quebec region. We're about 12,000 Anishinaabe people under with those different communities. We have people living outside our communities, but we still use the land. We still go to the land. We still, use in a way that's, respectful all living things in the waters and the land. So we still have very close links to the land, but also with the spiritual world. So with that, I'll finish with that. So I'll let you guys ask your questions for the later questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucien. The next round of question is going to actually ask you to talk about these things a little bit more in detail. So you'll have an opportunity again. Thank you so much. So let's hear from Mindahi.
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Mindahi Bastida from the Otomi Toltec peoples from Central Mexico. And it's a big honor to be here sharing all the problems and also the struggles that we are carrying out, not just in the last decades, but in some cases for centuries. But let me tell you that this misbehavior of human species goes beyond 500 years of dominion. It has been around 7,500 years, more or less, when some people, some nations, let's say some cultures, began to take over instead of taking care of life. So then this created this imbalance, because what we are holding as original nations, as original peoples, is this sacred relationship with nature, with Mother Earth and the celestial bodies. So for that, we have witnessed every day and every year the loss of biocultural diversity, because cultures are deeply related to the ecosystems and to nature. And we are in a time that we are now, we have lost more than, let's say, 7,000 languages in the world. before we had like more than 13,500 languages. Now we have around 7,500. So you can see this relationship with the loss of mammals, plants, minerals, and now they are after the rare earths, you know, the minerals, to produce these so-called new energies. And where are they? They are in our territories because, you know, we have kept, and we know that we have this sacred relationship with our mother, with our sacred sites and sacred spaces. So for long time, they have been over the gold, silver, and other metals. Later on, they were more exquisite in finding those precious stones. And later on, even around the so-called genetic resources and the traditional knowledge, associated traditional knowledge. But you can see what is going on in every place where we are. We are more or less facing what we call dispossession, because colonialism is acting every day, and not just materially, but also in the way of educating, in the curricula. When we go to school, to university, we are also alienated with this other way of thinking, this positivist way of thinking, Eurocentric way of thinking. So we have a very complex situation as regional nations, and still we have something to offer to the world. As I told you, this sacred relationship that we still have is in danger because we are losing our younger generations. When they go to the cities, they don't want to come back to the communities because alienation is working very hardly. So this is what is happening. So languages are, especially original languages, are at risk. From those 7,500 languages, 90% are at risk. So our languages are at risk, especially the languages that we speak. And when you lose your language, you lose that sacred relationship with the territory. So what is happening also is the land market, because you know, the nation states, they say they are owners of the underground and they are owners of the sky. And whenever they want to give a concession, they don't even ask us. Even this free, prior, informed consent principle that is stated in the 169 ILO Convention is not enough, because we don't want to be just to be asked, but we want to be in the decision-taking processes. We want to exert self-determination. We want to exert sovereignty. That's what we want. So all of these nature-based solutions and all of these REDD+ and these other mechanisms of the carbon offsets, those are neo-colonial, neoliberal policies to take over. And they are producing the same, very alike results from the colonial times. What is happening that when the state give concessions to our lands, we are not able to go in anymore. Like remember the so-called natural protected areas, where the deep ecology was in motion, because humans were not allowed to go in because, you know, conservation, this conservation word is damaging so much our cultures. Because we don't distinguish from nature and culture. It's interrelated. We cannot exist without nature and without culture. That's the main thing that we need to understand. So the Minga Indígena and the Alliance Guardians of Mother Nature, Mother Earth, the different councils that we have been creating as a way to come together, as a way to strengthen our struggle. It's just a way to face these neocolonial powers. But where we are just trying to do our best, because it's not just human species that we are at risk. Scientists say that it's at least 1 million species. And we are just another species. But what do we have here? Many, many things are happening in our communities. So that's the reason we want to address this in the next, you know, in the next questions, or in the next time, when we can really bring what we are doing. But for now, I just want to say that this is a great opportunity to meet each other, because you know, we are fulfilling the prophecies of the eagle and the condor, the prophecies of the new dawn, because this is the time, and the time is now to come together. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everybody. Candy, Leona, Lucien, Ruben, Mindaji. I really appreciate your interventions. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to please address these two questions that we have together. So first, I wanted to ask you, what are the strategies that you're developing in your communities to resist these false solutions on the basis of the long trajectory of indigenous resistance against settler colonialism, capitalism, and patriarchy? So what are the strategies? What are the ways of indigenous resistance? And also, what are the alternatives that are embodied by your communities? What are the real solutions that are put forward by indigenous peoples from hundreds and even thousands of years of lifeways into the past? So perhaps, Candy, would you like to get us started with those questions? Thank you.
Yes, that would be great. I would love to continue with, I started out talking about a very personal story of my community, and now I want to share, like you said, what work we've been doing. So you all may have heard of the Dakota Access Pipeline when we went to Standing Rock in 2016. That pipeline is coming from my community in the Bakken, where I just shared that information about oil development. And that pipeline is going through Standing Rock. You remember the dams I showed you in the beginning, cutting right across their dam, the Oahe Dam, which they were also forced to get their drinking water from. So standing in solidarity with other Native communities like the Oteti Shakoni. But we all know how that ended. Because we stood up and said, Mini Wachoni, water is life, water of life. Because we wanted to fight back against colonizers and colonial systems, we were forcibly removed by our own military in the United States. And this is not uncommon. This happens in other countries, as I'll get into in a little bit here. This next slide is going to be a little bit upsetting. If you have any children watching, maybe you'll have them look away, because I want to show you what they do to us here in the United States by shooting at us, using us for target practice. That night, I'm getting really emotional. Today is October 27th. It is the anniversary of one of the days that we were attacked by our own military. And then in November again, Over 500 people came into our medics. They were all shot either in the face, in the groin, or near their spine, intentionally, by military forces who said that they were using less than lethal weapons. But I also want to recognize my own privilege being here in the United States, because these things are happening around the world. Yes, we stand up against our political forces and our police forces here in the US in the belly of the beast. I stand up against them as a Native American person because we want to defend the sacred, that what we were just talking about, the sacredness of our air, our land, and our water. And yes, we have not yet shut down the Dakota Access Pipeline. We were forcibly removed, and oil is flowing through that pipeline, which incidentally has already had at least 3 leaks that we know of, probably a lot more that they tried to cover up. But internationally, this was brought up. What's the bigger picture besides one pipeline? So as the Indigenous Environmental Network, we work against this false solutions of carbon markets and carbon trading, this idea of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, which is pushed within the United Nations. Some of our early work was saying, actually, this is reaping profits from evictions, land grabs, deforestation, and destruction of biodiversity. That's what RED projects are. Well, going into this COP now, they're just talking about, they've changed the language to be very dangerous language around net zero and pushing for things within Article 6 and talking about how they're going to decrease the emissions in the sky, the carbon dioxide emissions. They don't ever talk about keeping it in the ground. That's not on the agenda at COP26. Fossil fuels, mining, uranium industry, these things are not on their agenda. And this is the 26th conference of the parties. And while all of that is happening, these REDS projects, the Amazon rainforest is being destroyed as a result of what they call solutions. This picture shows their solution, because what they do is they say, oh, it's okay for us to destroy the lungs of the earth, which is the Amazon rainforest. We can clear cut that. And I know that they say that because I meet my friends in these spaces, the United Nations spaces. My friends tell me this is what is happening in our communities, Candy. This is what they're doing to us. They're coming in and they're displacing us and telling us how we're going to operate and how we're going to run. My friend Gloria here is actually on a list of a person who is endangered because of speaking out against injustices in her community around oil and around the industry. She's in the global south and she's still standing up fighting. And I take so much pride and respect in knowing these women and these fighters and these warriors, because even though I have what I showed you happening here in the belly of the beast in the United States, I have a certain privilege just by being here. And we have to lift up our brothers and sisters in the global south, many of whom can't even go to these United Nations conferences, especially this year, from being shut out, which is great for the government because they'll try to sneak in anything that they can to continue using carbon trading and carbon offsets as their solution, which is a false solution. And my brothers and sisters in Australia, we've worked with them. I've reached out and I've worked with the Seed Youth Mob in Australia, and I've gone there because they were told that fracking in the Northern Territories wasn't going to upset anything, that all it was going to be a hole in the ground the size of a billy can, and that they didn't have to worry about fracking. So I went to them and I told them my struggle and my story, and they were like, what? The companies lied to us? Yes, because even if you have free, prior, and informed consent, that doesn't include necessarily the actual reality of what it's going to look like, what these details mean. The devil is in the details. So they'll lie to communities about REDS projects. They'll lie to communities about fracking coal, uranium, and other mining, but then get some person, maybe 1 or 2 people on a tribal council or in a leadership position to sign up, and therefore they consider it cleared. And so we continue to meet with our aunties in other countries, like my aunties here that I met in Australia, fighting to protect country. meeting with our relatives when I was in Bonn, Germany, who were again fighting a huge mining operation where they were just clear cutting and destroying and mining and strip mining and destroying lands. So meeting with people and understanding the struggle globally from a local perspective to an international perspective and becoming a sky protector as a result of knowing the truth. There is so much power in the truth, and we can all get behind understanding the truth by joining our organizations and doing a little bit of research and going out on the front lines and speaking back about what's happening in our own communities locally, but then also expanding that to work with international organizations like Women's Earth Climate Action Network, doing really good work, lifting up women in their stories. Or organizations like Madre, who is amazing, connecting women internationally and bringing us all together to share our stories and our struggles so that we can work collectively. We do things at home like the water blessing and healing walks that we haven't been able to have because of COVID, but we've had prayer circles virtually. We've gone to DC several times, Washington, DC, to say this is not what we want in our communities. Listen to us as Indigenous peoples. Listen to the stories that we have about how to tackle and combat the climate crisis. We set up teepees on the lawn and make ourselves known because we're always facing invisibility here in the United States. Our populations were so decimated by colonization that we now only make up 2% of the population in the United States. So we have decided to do a just transition program and curriculum. This is at the Haskell Nations Indian University in Lawrence, Kansas, where we are implementing a just transition program right within our schooling. And we are reaching out to higher institutions to do this as well. We are reaching out to elementary schools to stop brainwashing our kids like I was, and to teach our kids what it means to have a transition. And there is no one size fits all. That's what the US tries to do and what the United Nations tries to do, is one size fits all is going to save us, and that does not work. We have to do small scale, local distributed actions and education forums. We are building earth lodges in our community again, remembering our culture, bringing back our culture, how we used to live. Sure, this one has a cement floor because it's a modern version that we can use for cultural programming, for teaching our language that, yes, is unfortunately being lost. And it's been a struggle to learn because of the boarding school eras and how our grandparents were beat if they spoke their language by a US government system that actually has a termination era where they tried to kill us, but we survived. Our grandmothers survived. And we're still here fighting, trying to find ways for energy to work for us. So small scale distributed systems of power, like Lakota Solar Enterprises. Henry Red Cloud once told me he knows how to build a solar panel using bone and ash and the sun and a blower in order to create power and energy. And it's not energy of what we're wasting right now. It's not energy to power like cities. This is at Standing Rock where the pipeline, this runs right by where the pipeline runs. So there's a solar panel array there now. But we need small scale. We need to uplift our communities like native renewables, because these large scale corporate schemes in wind and solar, you heard, they're digging out the precious minerals in South America, once again, to have these giant corporations and to continue to make money about it. That's not what it's about. It's about each home having its own mode of being able to live in a way that is not just surviving, but also thriving, but not off the backs of other people. And let's talk about our food systems, because if we can't even feed ourselves, we're not truly sovereign nations. We need to be able to either have small scale gardens or large scale gardens and remember how to grow our own food. If our soil is contaminated, we can't do that. Our Indigenous principles of just transition show these booklets that we have. We can go on ienearth.org and you can actually look into the booklet yourself and make it make sense for your community. This is one of the projects that we're working on as the Indigenous Environmental Network to show what a just transition might look like in our communities. We are having basket making sessions in our communities where my husband was able to help organize a 3-day workshop to relearn our culture and use our own baskets instead of plastics, for example, in our community, because this is what we used to do a long time ago. And this is what makes sense for us. We are able to bring community members together to relearn our culture, to laugh and to tell stories, to grow small-scale community gardens, which are able to produce enough crops. Our communities are small so that we can roast and dry enough corn to give every elder in our community this year one bag of corn and beans. So every elder was able to grow, to make their own corn soup, one of our traditional foods. And we're going to grow that project. That's part of our just tradition work, and it is for the next 7 generations. If we don't speak for them, who will? These suits at the conference in the United Nations? No. Our kids are sacred. Our kids are precious. Just like all of the 4-legged and the winged and those that swim in the waters, they need us to be the voice for them. If we don't speak for them, who will? That's the work that we do at the Indigenous Environmental Network with our allies as a whole, the It Takes Roots Coalition, who now has our Hoodwinked in the Hothouse pamphlet that you guys saw and you can get online, to talk about all of the false solutions and to call them out. And we're doing it because it's common sense, because we collectively as humanity need to save ourselves. Matsikirads, everybody. I'll stop there. Thank you.
A humble thank you, Candy. Leona, would you like to share the ways in which your communities and organizations are resisting and how they embody actual real solutions?
Yeah, I can try. I'm not sure about we're working on real solutions, and I'm going to share my screen again and elaborate on one of the slides I skipped over. This is actually not my personal story, but this is some of the work I'm engaged in right now, is this issue of abandoned uranium mines. So earlier I mentioned there's 15,000 in the country with no law to clean them up. So basically anybody right now, I would ask people in the US who are feeling okay to call your Congress representative or senator. I put a link in the chat about RECA, which is the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, but you can talk to your elected officials. I encourage everyone to call them and tell any elected official that you are close to or not even close to, just any story today. A lot of them are on the federal level, they're on the national level, and any number of them, you can call your representatives and just tell them, I'm really concerned about what Candy talked about. I'm really concerned about dams or uranium or nuclear, because we really need people to call those folks in Congress. And so the stories, the 2 things I'm going to share, you can contact me. I got one of my colleagues, Jesse Deerenwater, manning the chat or watching the chat. Excuse my language. I don't want to be patriarchal, but anyway, so this is a map that I wanted to highlight this specific community. So I'm going to share a couple slides. It shouldn't take too long. This is the site of the world's largest uranium spill. So this is close to Gallup, New Mexico, which is a border town of the Navajo Nation and New Mexico. And it's in a place called Church Rock. Well, technically it's north of Church Rock. This is in a place called Redwater Pond Road Community. So right here, I know it's hard to see, but there's some little white, you can see some structures here. These white squares represent houses. So this is a community that lives there still today. Some of them were moved out. They were bought out by the EPA to move them out of here. Again, divide and conquer. So there's a uranium mine here. And then there's 2 mines on this other side, one mine here and another one off the picture. But the community literally lives between 2 uranium mines. And then just down the road, a uranium mill site. So just to fast forward, this company, United Nuclear Corporation, it's now owned by General Electric. They were mining here, and then they were processing here, and their waste was stored right here. In 1979, in the morning of July 16th, which is the same day as the first atomic test, which is really weird because it was at the same time in the same day, 5:30 in the morning, July 16th. The waste was being held with a dam that broke. So all of that radioactive waste, it got into the environment. And then through this little ditch here, it reached a river that transported over 90 million gallons of waste over 100 miles into Arizona. It's never been cleaned up, never been studied. So fast forward to today, General Electric is, they have to clean up the site. So they're proposing to move the mine waste from here, 1 million cubic yards. They want to pile it on top of where this old waste was. And the community's like, hey, there was a big flood, a big spill a few years ago. This is all a floodplain. What happens with climate change? And if there's another big flood, you're setting up a second big accident. So just to show you a couple pictures of the community, they're very active. They bring attention to this issue every year. And sometimes elected officials show up. Not a lot has been done. Just this week, the Navajo Nation is calling on a congressional hearing about this and what people can do. So again, the cleanup would be from moving the mine waste from here on top of this other waste pile here. And the options are, do you want us to make a conveyor belt or do you want us to truck it? There's no option of not doing this and having a different plan. The cherry on top of this kind of horrible situation is that the more radioactive waste, they'll move to an indigenous community in Utah, which is the plan right now. And Hall No is an organization I work with. We're trying to stop this. So you can go to our website for how to send comments and all of that. The deadline is on Halloween. But just going back to the other waste issue, Jesse Deerenwater is someone who lives near a nuclear reactor. Sorry about that, in Detroit. So you can go to his website, nferminow.org. I think we'll put it in the chat. So we're fighting this nuclear issue on the uranium end and the nuclear power plant end, and we're inviting other indigenous communities anywhere in the middle impacted by uranium or nuclear to join us. For example, with this proposal for the waste dumps here in Southeast New Mexico and Texas, the transport would be by rail. So nationally, everybody is kind of at risk if you live near a railroad. So this BNSF railroad goes by 2 of our sacred mountains. As Diné people, I'm really concerned if there was an accident that might permanently contaminate our sacred mountains. And of course, our water and our health and all of that. But this is one of the reasons I'm really concerned. So I'm just inviting people to join us. We're going to try to have some community meetings, dialogue before the end of the year. You can email us at endnuclearcolonialism@gmail.com. All the other congressional stuff I'll put in the chat. Thanks.
Many thanks, Leona. I'm now going to shift over to Rubén. Rubén, ¿podrías compartirnos la manera en la que sus comunidades y organizaciones mapuche están resistiendo estos proyectos y las soluciones reales que vienen desde las comunidades? Can you share with us how your Mapuche communities are resisting these projects and how that resistance embodies real solutions to climate and environmental crisis? Rubén.
Gracias. Bueno, como continuando un poco con parte de lo anterior, lo que ocurre es que nosotros somos sometidos a leyes, digamos, que no definimos, nosotros en la que no participamos, y finalmente somos expuestos a una serie de leyes y normas, digamos, que son fundamentalmente del Estado, en este caso el Estado de Chile, y diseñada para seguir ocupando territorios y ahí en ese sentido quiero ir derechamente a lo que planteaba en este caso Leonardo, que son las estrategias. Y frente a eso, yo creo que lo fundamental y lo clave es tener una estrategia. Diseñar una estrategia colectiva que permita hacer la resistencia y mantener la resistencia. Los estándares, como en este contexto, digamos, de las falsas soluciones, son definidos, no cabe duda también por ello. Por ejemplo, en el caso de las empresas forestales, la certificación FSC, digamos, que le permite meterse o incorporar a las empresas a otros mercados, y hoy día, como le mencionaba al final, ya en términos de cambio climático, el plantearse o diseñar mecanismos para certificarse como carbono neutral. En el caso de las energías, en el caso de particularmente de las empresas hidroeléctricas, los proyectos son evaluados hay un sistema de evaluación de impacto ambiental, ¿no es cierto? O sea, los proyectos de inversión ingresan a ese sistema. Ese sistema también está diseñado para ellos, y nosotros, los pueblos indígenas o los territorios, no conocemos y no sabemos de absolutamente nada de ese sistema. Entonces lo que ocurre es que uno se enfrenta a una situación desconocida, y tiene que ahí diseñar estrategias colectivas para el efecto de mantener la resistencia por un lado y proteger y mantener el territorio por el otro. Entonces, en particular, en el caso de nosotros, la comunidad Calimán Sánchez, digamos, de la cual formo parte, y la que dije al principio que mi padre era el jefe ahí, el lonco de comunidad, nos tocó y estamos, digamos, en proceso de resistencia en particular sobre un proyecto que se llama el proyecto de Central Yancalil, que se emplaza en la cordillera, obviamente donde hay agua agua y pendiente, digamos, está la condición espacial ideal para efectos de construir un proyecto y bajar los costos fundamentalmente. ¿Cómo hemos hecho la resistencia y mantenido? En ese sentido nosotros, y yo aquí quiero compartir un poco, tomamos todas las opciones y todos los mecanismos. Desde lo que es propio, la resistencia propia y normal, la oposición en principio, pero luego, en mediano plazo, tratamos de utilizar las herramientas que ellos mismos diseñan para efecto de hacer ocupación de nuestro espacio territorio. ¿En qué sentido? Digamos, en el sentido de, en este caso, la ley del Servicio de Evaluación de Impacto Ambiental, lo que hicimos nosotros fue de que efectivamente se cumpliera, y utilizando, o sea, que si es que hay vulneración de ese instrumento o no lo hay. Entonces, utilizamos el mecanismo de ello, o sea, fuimos a jugar en su cancha, por un lado. Y por otro lado también, utilizamos también el mecanismo de mercado, el mecanismo de negocio con lo que ellos funcionan. O sea, en concreto, es ponerse en la racionalidad y en la forma de pensar de ellos, ¿ya? Porque esa es nuestra ventaja, digamos, como parte de ser un territorio. La ventaja que nosotros tenemos es que nosotros conocemos al otro, ¿ya? Y ellos no nos conocen a nosotros. Entonces, ellos van e intervienen sobre un territorio y sobre un espacio y se imaginan que es un espacio, o sea, lo saben y se imaginan, es el prejuicio les dice de que es un territorio, ¿no es cierto?, donde hay comunidades indígenas débil y debilitadas, ¿no es cierto?, que es fácil de ocupar y fácil de intervenir. Esa es su imaginación, esa es su afirmación, ese es su juicio, ¿no es cierto?, generado a partir del prejuicio. Pero la ventaja nuestra es que nosotros conocemos a ellos, cómo funciona, digamos, cómo funciona. Lo que hicimos entonces es conocer el sistema de evaluación de impacto ambiental, por uno, y segundo, cómo funciona en este caso el negocio, digamos, de la producción de energía, ¿ya? Entonces el planteamiento que le hicimos como territorio, que hicimos fue lo siguiente: mira, sabes que nosotros no hacemos oposición, digamos, al proyecto, que venga el proyecto, ¿no? Es un poco una jugada, es un juego táctico que yo quiero compartir con ustedes dentro del proceso de definición de estrategia. No, o sea, es no oponerse, digamos, al proyecto, entre comillas, no oponerse, ¿no? Sino que decir, ya, hagamos el proyecto. Pero el tema es qué es lo que tienen ustedes y qué es lo que tenemos nosotros. Y lo que hicimos fue una descomposición de los aportes para efecto de la construcción de ese proyecto. ¿Y qué es lo que tenemos nosotros para efecto de la construcción de un proyecto en este caso, de un proyecto de energía de una central hidroeléctrica? Nosotros tenemos el espacio y tenemos el agua, que son los recursos para hacer la producción de energía. ¿Y qué es lo que tienen ahí? ¿Qué es lo que tienen ellos, el inversionista, el que ocupa, digamos, el que pretende hacer intervención, ocupación del espacio? Lo que tiene es el conocimiento de la tecnología, ¿no es cierto? Y el capital, el dinero. Ambas dos nosotros también la podemos tener. Nosotros también podemos acceder a los recursos. Y también podemos acceder a ese conocimiento, a ese know-how que le llaman. Entonces, en concreto, si uno hace eso, digamos, la composición del capital para la construcción de un proyecto energético, ellos no tienen nada. Y si no tienen nada, o es muy poco lo que tienen, y si nosotros tenemos el espacio y el agua, que son los que finalmente generan el recurso, los socios nosotros los podemos elegir. Entonces aquel que presenta el proyecto puede no ser un buen socio. Y lo que hicimos nosotros es precisamente demostrar que él era un mal socio. Y como era un mal socio, entonces era desechable. ¿Ya? No sé si me siguen, pero es un juego táctico finalmente dentro del proceso de resistencia y dentro del proceso de protección, digamos, del territorio. Entonces, eso por un lado, digamos, en términos concretos del negocio. Hagamos el negocio, ¿ya? Y produzcamos energía, no hay problema, pero lo voy a hacer yo. Y si entramos en mecanismos de sociedad, una sociedad compuesta por acciones, si yo soy mayoritario, si yo soy accionista mayoritario, cuando digo yo me refiero al territorio, a la comunidad, si es accionista mayoritario, la comunidad finalmente tiene la decisión de hacerlo o no hacerlo. Entonces, cuando establecimos ese negocio ficticio y la constitución de los aportes, y lo que le estoy contando es verdad, nosotros nos sentamos a hacer el negocio y la constitución de los aportes, hicimos la constitución de aportes, llegamos a determinar que nosotros podíamos tener el control de la inversión y por lo tanto tomamos la decisión. ¿Cuál fue la decisión? No hacer el proyecto, ¿no? Es meterse al razonamiento, a la lógica. Si quieren hacer negocio y quieres hacer negocio, tienes que hacer negocios en serio, ¿ya? Y ahí eres un inversionista serio. O sea, nosotros tenemos el control porque tenemos el territorio, podemos. Obviamente que no funcionó, porque ellos insistieron en continuar, que esa no era la forma porque ellos lo tenían todo, pero no lo tenían todo, la verdad. Segundo paso, digamos, y en términos, siguiendo un poco con esto de la estrategia de la resistencia o el mecanismo, lo que al ellos insistir y seguir en esta cosa, digamos, del sistema de evaluación, porque nos someten a una serie de formas, digamos, que no conocemos, entonces lo que ocurre es que ellos insistieron y siguieron con el tema legal, y ahí entonces nosotros exactamente también hicimos lo mismo. Y hoy día tenemos a la empresa, en este caso a la central, a Swiss Hydro o Hydro Yancalil, la tenemos demandada, digamos, en tribunales ambientales, haciendo cumplir los estándares, ojo, estándares no definidos por nosotros, definidos por ellos, pero que en rigor nosotros haciéndolo cumplir y obligando en esto que ustedes también en algunos de los expositores mencionaban, el convenio 169, ¿ya? Entonces, diciendo de que este proyecto, al entrar al sistema, no hace la consulta y al no consultar, digamos, lo tenemos demandado por consulta. El proyecto lo tenemos ahí ya a punto, digamos, lo que quiero decir es que en todos los mecanismos, en todas las formas, hemos ido ganando. Hemos ganado en cada una de las instancias judiciales, hemos ganado a la empresa. Y en términos también del diálogo, entre comillas, de ese diálogo de negociación, también ganamos en términos de forma. ¿Por qué? Porque nosotros, y yo creo que esto es lo que quiero decirle, quiero compartirle, ¿ya? De pronto, la resistencia no es solamente decir no, sino también decir sí, sino cómo tenemos el control en ese sentido, ¿ya? Nosotros como territorio, como parte de los pueblos indígenas, tenemos una ventaja, ¿ya? Y la ventaja es la que estamos compartiendo de alguna manera y que ya han dicho parte de los compañeros, ¿ya? Que nosotros tenemos una forma de ver y de vivir distinta. Y esa forma ellos no la conocen, no saben. Nosotros tenemos una fuerza, ¿no es cierto? Y tenemos una energía. Nosotros tenemos un todo, y ya lo decía un compañero, ¿ya? Nosotros nos fragmentamos respecto de la división. ¿Ya? Lo fundamental en este sentido, por eso a veces yo no comparto con aquellos que dicen que tenemos problemas de agua. Porque pensar en que tienes problemas de agua también es la forma occidental de ver la vida. Nosotros lo que tenemos es que proteger y cautelar el territorio. ¿Y por qué dentro del territorio está el agua, está el todo? Por eso es que yo al principio cuando decía el establecimiento de la propiedad y la propietarización lo que hace es romper con el territorio. Y eso es lo que ocurrió un poco con nosotros. Y voy a ocupar mi tiempo y con esto termino, porque respondiendo a las dos preguntas, yo creo que como a la pregunta que hacía Leonardo al final, ¿cuál es el camino? ¿Cuál es más allá, digamos, de las falsas soluciones? Yo creo que el camino es eso. El camino para nosotros es el territorio, en la reconstrucción del territorio y el fortalecimiento del territorio, entendido un territorio como un espacio de vida. Eso, Peucayal, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ruben. Thank you, Ruben. We will, I'll ask Lucien and then Mindahi to just provide us closing the ways in which your communities are resisting and the ways in which that resistance embodies real solutions to climate change. And Mindahi, perhaps you, after Lucien, want to add a little bit about how this comes together in the Indigenous Minga towards COP26. Lucien? I think, Lucien, are you able to hear us?
Maybe we go to
yeah, we can go to Mindahi. Mindahi, could you share a little bit about how this indigenous resistance and alternatives take us to COP26 through the Indigenous Minga? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I like to say that we have different approaches and diverse approaches to really face this neocolonial nature-based solutions now in the Article 6 that is being negotiated in the COP26. And let me tell you that both at the local and international level is very important to really push forwards around any strategy that we have. From the local levels, the Minga Indigenous Minga are protecting indigenous territories in various ways. For example, with the Zapara and in the Sarayaku communities of the Quechua peoples in Ecuador, they are talking about the selva viviente, the living jungle or the living forest. So all about that is to really protect the integrity of territories. But at the international level, groups like the Minga Indigenous Minga, we are coming together to exchange and to share our struggles and how we have been able to, even to, as our brother Mapuche was saying, how we can play with the national institutions that are taking over, and how we can defend ourselves with the same mechanisms that they are implanting. But at the international level, the thing is that most of the times, some original nations leaders are being paid by NGOs, international organizations, and they play under the agenda of those NGOs or those companies or those nation states. So in the Minga Indígena, it's different because most of the time, everyone pays for their own ticket and they look for the support of people in the, wherever is going to take place, the COP, and they ask for support from citizens. So in that respect, because of COVID-19, it's been difficult because there's no so much resources to travel. So we have been asking for support from other organizations. So the fact is that we are going to be able to, some of us, we are going to be able to participate in several side events and also in the blue zone, in the green zone. But I can tell you myself, I'm going to be participating with an ecocide. And there is going to be a very important dialogue between the IMF and indigenous leaders from around the world. So this is a big chance because we need to act at those levels to really educate, because sometimes they don't even know what they are producing with these red laws and these credit offsets. What they are producing now is just a continuation of the taking over of lands and peoples and territories. So the Minga Indígena is coming together to really bring the message from the communities at the international level and how we are demanded to protect the integrity of territories. You know, some people is talking about at least to protect half of the earth biodiversity. But we know that it's not just half of the earth. Now it is said that 80% of the biodiversity in the world is in the indigenous people's territories, in the original nations. But it's a lot of work to carry out and protecting because our leaders are being killed, are being dispossessed from the territories and the lands and the, you know, and the so-called resources. For us, they are not resources. They are sacred territories, sacred lands, sacred waters. So what is happening is that we are bringing to the international level the ancestral wisdom and the messages from Mother Earth, how to behave and how to live in peace and harmony and in responsibility with this planet, with Mother Earth. So the Minga Indígena is going to have a big presence in the COP26, and also we are going to carry out some manifestations. We are going to participate in the marches that are being organized. And we are going to let the world know what is happening at the local level, how we are defending life. And we need that support from other citizens that are already realizing that the problem is not just in our territories, the problem is around the world. So we need to work together with other people, like-minded people that are already realizing that this is a common problem. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mindahi. We strongly support in solidarity the Minga Indígena delegation to COP26. I'd like to ask Lucien if there are any final words that you'd like to share before we close this event. If we maybe can have Lucien. Yes, any final words before we close this event?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Lucien, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear
Can
you.
you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you guys.
Can you hear me, Lucien? We can hear you. He can't hear us.
Unfortunately, I think we have a bit of a disconnection, and I don't know. Lucian, can you hear us? No. I think Lucian is not able to hear us, unfortunately. I do prompt folks to, we're going to share some resources on the struggles against Hydro-Quebec in the chat. Also, as we close this event, we will follow up with everybody who registered and joined our event. We will follow up by sending some resources for further engagement, joining campaigns, learning more, reading more. And I'd like to pass it on to my co-moderator, Sheila Harif, for some closing words.
Well, thank you, Leo, and thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. I feel like I learned tremendous amount, and it just always feels like the time was too short. There's so much more to know. So I thank you all for sharing with us your experiences and stories. And I hope that this acts as a seed for action for all of us. So people who have joined us on this webinar, thank you so much for your presence. And as Leo said, we will follow up with more resources, and hopefully we continue the momentum, which is what we really need at this time. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night, morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Shudi. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks.